hope we can start. Dear colleagues, dear Eric, it's a great honor for me on behalf of the School of International Regional Studies of the Faculty of World Economy and International Affairs, HSE University, and on behalf of our head of the school, Dr. Vishnikova, welcome you and our dear guest today at our online seminars as a part of Contemporary Area Studies project. Dear guest, today we will hold a discussion with a postdoctoral fellow at our school, Dr. Eriks Varpahovskis, and our topic will be about cultural battlefield for China, Japan, and South Korea in the 21st century, competing for global and regional leadership in intangible cultural heritage. So our today event will be divided into two main parts. First part will be our key speaker introduction lecture. It will take about 30 minutes maximum, and after that it will be another 30 minutes for our question and discussion, question and answer part. So, dear Eric, now the floor is yours. Please, you can start.
Okay, thank you, Murad. Okay, hello everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for spending your time with us. And as Murad mentioned, I'll talk about intangible cultural heritage and how China, Japan, and South Korea battle for it at international level, at a regional level as well. So this is quite up-to-date issue, and I think you have heard about some recent topics about that. For example, China claimed that Koreans debated that Chinese claimed that kimchi is Chinese, or Japanese objected China's inclusion letters on massacre in Nanjing to one of UNESCO's registers, and some other heritage issues. And they are both discussed by scholars. You can see some titles of papers on the left, and also some newspapers and even tabloids. Actually, tabloids, they kind of spur the debate on it. Obviously, we cannot include all possible aspects and platforms where debates between China, Japan, and South Korea occur. And I would like to concentrate on one particular platform that is considered by Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans quite seriously. While Western Hemisphere nations, they kind of overlook it and sometimes even ignore. Namely, I'll talk about the intangible cultural heritage. The presentation has three parts. The first one is kind of boring, but necessary. I will touch upon definitions and organization of intangible cultural heritage safeguarding within UNESCO. And then we will move to more exciting parts where we'll compare Chinese, Japanese, and South Korean cultural policies on ICH, Intangible Cultural Heritage. And also later I will share some thoughts on how this competition impacts regional and international politics in the region. So first things first. Probably you have already heard about World Heritage, the World Heritage List, and it is more common for people to know about the heritage that is tangible. It was originally discussed after World War I and in 1972. The Convention concerning the protection of world cultural and natural heritage developed and was introduced by UNESCO. But that time it was only tangible heritage. This kind of heritage was not that popular and shared in Eastern Hemisphere, and eventually nations came up with the rethinking model of heritage and introduced intangible one. Intangible cultural heritage started formally started in 2006 with an introduction of so-called Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. And at that time, 30 states had ratified the convention before 20th of January 2006 or a little bit after. So it started that time. So within this convention, the intangible cultural heritage is defined. I'll just read from a slide that time because I'm quoting official document. So basically, intangible cultural heritage means the practices, representations, expressions, knowledge, skills, as well as the instruments, objects, artifacts, and cultural spaces associated therewith that communities, groups, in some cases individuals, that recognize that are sometimes recognized as a part of the cultural heritage. Also, the intangible cultural heritage is manifested inter alia in the following domains. First, it is oral traditions, expressions, including language, as a vehicle of intangible cultural heritage. Second is performing arts. Third is social practices, rituals, and festive events. Four is knowledge and practices concerning nature and the universe. And five is traditional craftsmanship. Also, this convention defines safeguarding. It is an important term for our discussion today. Safeguarding means measures aimed at ensuring the viability of intangible cultural heritage, including the identification, documentation, research, preservation, protection, promotion, enhancement, transmission, particularly through formal and non-formal education, as well as revitalization of the various aspects of such heritage. And also, what should be mentioned that by 2020, we have already 180 states that have ratified or accepted or approved the Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage. And yeah, what is also important when you're trying to declare your, as a nation state, when you try to declare your cultural heritage element as intangible cultural heritage on the UNESCO's list, you have two ways to do it. So there are two lists. One is list of intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding, and you can get it from the name of this list. Those are heritage elements that require help and assistance in safeguarding in order to prevent its disappearance. And second one is more, I would say, prestigious. The representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity is made up of those intangible heritage elements that help demonstrate the diversity of this heritage and raise awareness about its importance. So, two lists. And talking about another thing, money, the budget for this organization is quite small, just 7.8 million. And mainly it is composed of the obligatory contributions from states involved in it. However, there are voluntary supplementary contributions by funds in trust, loan personnel by countries, or even voluntary contributions by private or public organizations and individuals. Also, countries provide some centers that help promoting the heritage idea and this convention. Oh, one more Yeah, okay. One more thing. Also, there is, like, we should know something about hierarchy. Basically, there is the body called the committee that approves or disapproves this or that nominated inscriptions by countries. Okay, so now we're moving to more interesting part. As you understood, countries submit their proposal for inscription of cultural heritage elements to the committee. On this slide, you can see the number of countries that are heading the table by number of inscribed elements as ICH, Intangible Cultural Heritage. And China, Japan, and South Korea altogether have 84 elements inscribed by now. Totally, there are 559 elements inscribed. And it means that East Asian trio has about 15% of all inscribed intangible cultural heritage elements. Furthermore, the top 3 positions are taken by China with 41 elements, Japan with 22, and South Korea with 21. Recently, France also got 21 element and reached South Korea in this, let's say, race. So how it become possible that East Asian countries are leading in intangible cultural heritage list? Well, let's see dynamics. On this chart, we see that in the first year of this convention, in 2008, there were introduced 90 elements altogether, but all of them were transferred from previous project by UNESCO called Masterpieces of the Oral and Intangible Heritage of Humanity. And what happened in 2009? There was incredible influx of inscriptions by China. 25 elements were inscribed in one go. Japan and Korea inscribed only 9 and 5 respectively. In 2009, China used window of opportunity to skyrocket with a number of ICH elements. Actually, Korea wanted to do the same in 2010, but there was introduced a cap for 50 nominations from all countries involved, and Korean 20 nominations to representative list, and Japanese 5 nominations were treated as backlog files. So backlog files basically are the files that could not have been treated due to the limited capacities of the committee, its bodies, and the secretariat. And what happened then in 2010? So like the cap was introduced, only 50 elements could be inscribed per year. Also, from 2012, it became impossible to introduce multiple elements in 1 year for representative lists. However, it's still possible to introduce multiple elements if it is an urgent safeguarding need, or if it is an international joint application. And also, we should talk about type of inscriptions. If we talk about cultural heritage, with whom there is a possibility to submit multinational inscription. If we talk about culture, let's ask ourselves, with whom would you cooperate for international joint application? Probably it will be the closest countries that are closest culturally, right? For example, Turkey is active in cooperation with Central Asian states and Azerbaijan because of some Turkic background. Arabs often nominate elements together. Also, Balkan countries nominate elements together. But what about East Asia? With East Asia, the picture is absolutely different. China has only 2 joint nominations, joint inscriptions, with Mongolia in 2008 and Malaysia. Inscription with Mongolia was just transferred from previous lists. And for Malaysian case, it is interesting that it was inscribed the Ong Chun ceremony, which is practiced in China and also is practiced by Chinese communities in Malaysia. As for Japan, it has no joint inscriptions, and as for Korea, it has 3 cooperational inscriptions. Latest one is with North Korea. Inscription with North Korea was done in quite a non-standard way. Initially, both countries started process themselves, but later the committee allowed them to unite their efforts because of the warming relations at that time between Koreas in 2016, in 2018, sorry. Also in 2016, Korea joined super multinational nomination of falconry, and I think it was initiated by one of heads of Gulf countries at that time. And in 2015, Korea had joint application with Vietnam, Philippines, and Cambodia. It was actually, Korea was actually main initiator and organizer of this nomination. Also, I think I will skip this part. Okay. Also, you can see that only China has urgent safeguarding list nominations, but all of them, they were made before 2011. And I believe it is because of possible national image impact that they can bring. Imagine if you're nominating your cultural heritage that is labeled as urgent labeled as a need for urgent safeguarding. It puts you in a bad light about how you treat your cultural heritage, right? Also, as I mentioned, there are centers that help ICH and UNESCO to promote the goals of the convention, but surprisingly, there are 8 centers around the world, and 3 of them, they are located in China, Japan, and Korea. Rest are located in Algeria, Iran, Peru, like following accordingly to the regions they represent. So it happened in a way that China, Japan, and Korea applied almost in the same time for hosting this center, and UNESCO had nothing to do, had no options, and didn't want to reject any propositions, so decided to share responsibilities of centers between 3 countries. In this way, they could keep on board all 3 countries, and it was important because all of them, they are active promoters of ICH in the world, right? And one of the biggest contributors to the budget. Okay, as for these are numbers for the budget, quite small though. We're moving to the third vector of, or fourth vector of competition. I would say this is quite juicy part. These are contents of inscriptions. First, the regulations for inscriptions are made in a way that you cannot prize regime, cannot blame or attack any other country. Furthermore, the convention does not allow claiming authenticity or ownership over heritage. However, we live in the world of contexts and narratives and symbolism, and inscribing countries might understand it in a different way. One of the most famous collision between China and Korea occurred in 2009. In 2005, Korea inscribed Tanoji Festival in Gangneung, and it was transferred in 2008 to ICH list. Okay, and in 2009, China inscribed Dragon Boat Festival and felt that it kind of reclaimed ownership and authenticity back. Problem was that festivals have some similar components, and Tanoje Festival has strong heritage roots from Chinese culture. That's not surprising. So once Korea inscribed it, Chinese felt kind of insecure about authenticity of own culture identity or heritage. So maybe it can also explain somewhat a huge number of inscriptions by China in 2009. There were 25, as you recall. Maybe they wanted to protect belonging of certain traditions to Chinese. Also, China is active in inscribing intangible cultural heritage elements that are practiced by ethnic minorities. So among inscriptions that happened in 2009 was a farmer's dance by ethnic Korean group who live in China in Yanbian region. So on the one hand, they safeguarded ethnic minority culture. On the other hand, this kind of inscription symbolically highlights that Korean ethnic minority lives in China under Chinese control or like within Chinese civilization. Also, China inscribed in similar fashion elements from Uyghur culture. I think it's here, yeah. Lom Medigan bathing so Rigpa and Meshrep. Meshrep, yeah. And Kyrgyz culture and Mongolian culture and Tibetan culture. So on the one hand, those elements should become protected. On the other hand, they are portrayed. They portray image of China as a protector of those minor cultures, and also it kind of maybe prevents some separatist mood among minorities living in China. As for Japan and Korea, there are also curious inscriptions that spurred debate on gastro-diplomacy and even gastro-nationalism. Namely, Japan and Korea introduced as ICH inscriptions washoku, which is Japanese dietary tradition that highlights its distinction from Chinese and Western dietary cultures. And Korean kimjang, basically the kimchi making practices tradition. These discussions were spurred by media because even though ICH kind of safeguards these elements, ICH inscription kind of safeguards these elements, these inscriptions somehow pursue the goal of establishment of authority of countries over these or that dietary practices. And even though UNESCO ICH convention never says that if you inscribe this element, it belongs to your nation, but UNESCO is an international organization, and if UNESCO acknowledges something as like cultural heritage, it means that symbolically kind of all the world acknowledges it. And plus the acknowledgement also serves as an outstanding advertising feature and benefit. Hence, it is not surprising that after Koreans inscribed kimjang, the Chinese attempt to codify paoche, which is a type of fermented pickled vegetables, and it led to so-called kimchi wars. And International Standardization Organization had to emphasize the paoche standard has nothing to do with kimchi. Also, in 1996, there were debates between Japanese and Koreans on how to deal with kimochi, which is also fermented food, but is not, and Koreans debated that it's not kimchi, so it should be codified differently. And also, like one one more element, one more thing to highlight. As I mentioned, cultural heritage also can function as the instrument to strengthen relations between countries. And one of the cases is this China-Malaysian joint application, when China kind of strengthened its relations with Chinese people living in Malaysia. And another thing is a joint application between North Korea and South Korea on inscribing traditional Korean wrestling. And we're moving to the final part, I believe. Here, I will just sum up policies, cultural policies in regards of ICH by countries. As for China, we can see some Sinocentric mood, some Sinocentric attitude. Chinese try to portray own culture, own inscriptions as a civilizational umbrella for neighboring countries and for minorities living in China. Also, they try to portray that that they are acting as defenders, protectors of minorities. Also, they're trying to prevent some separatism, and also interesting features that they're trying to engage with Chinese diaspora. Also, one common thing for all policies, it is that it's kind of this race for number of inscriptions, for centers, UNESCO centers, for budget claims. They all kind of portray that countries seeking either status quo or even playing zero-sum game. And they do not want each other to benefit too much to be able to show its cultural, let's say, superiority maybe. As for Japan, its Japanese approach is quite distinct, different from Chinese. Japan tries to show its distinction from neighbors. Japan tries to show its distinction from Chinese and Western cultures through inscriptions. Also, Japan inscribes alone. All inscriptions are solo, and it is not clear yet how they will act later, because whether they are satisfied with quantity of inscriptions or not, but now they can nominate files only one time per 2 years if they act solo. In this case, Korea might surpass it soon, or even France. And as for South Korea, there is also some distinction from China. Namely, Korea doesn't want to engage with China and Japan, but it wants to engage with the closest culturally country ever, with DPRK. And also it is seeking different ways to inscribe more, to increase the number of inscriptions. And here I want to discuss a little bit some positive and negative aspects of this whole system and impacts on the international relations in the region and globally. From positive side, I would say that UNESCO is doing good job in terms of improving knowledge about how to safeguard your cultural elements, your cultural heritage. Also, UNESCO improves, increases awareness about it, increases awareness about different cultural heritage issues. That is important. Furthermore, UNESCO contributes to knowledge about diversity, that we're all different and it is good and it should be acknowledged. And the mechanisms of UNESCO ICH also stimulates inclusion of NGOs and just average people in decision-making about cultural heritage. Plus, inscription of intangible cultural heritage promotes tourism. This is kind of pluses. There are more controversial issues that I want to discuss with you, namely, there is, due to this old model and due to the race for numbers of inscriptions, ICH, Intangible Cultural Heritage, is being simplified. So politicians, countries, they tend to care about numbers, but not about the content in that sense. Also, there happens so-called hyper-canonization of UNESCO ICH. It means hyper-canonization means that I'll give example of Google. Google collects information from all around the world, and based on its algorithms, decides what to show, when to show, to whom to show this information, and it kind of it becomes a monopolist in this field. So kind of same thing happens to UNESCO ICH. UNESCO ICH decides what kind of cultural heritage should be accepted internationally and spreads information about it. It gives it kind of structural power over other nations. And this structural power leads to the competition within UNESCO ICH for the special status for such countries like China, Japan, and Korea. Because if you see that organization have some structural power, why not to reach some special status and try to drive it and manipulate it somehow. Also, the biggest problem, I believe, of UNESCO ICH is the so-called symbolic power of ICH element attribution. Whatever UNESCO says, the element that is inscribed in this or that list, it is labeled with one of countries, and it gives some symbolical perception that it belongs to it. And this kind of provokes debates and collisions between countries who might share this element or have different perception how it is represented in the list. Also, it leads automatically to securitization of cultural heritage elements. By this, I mean that imagine if some country portrays your cultural heritage or replicates it, and you start losing some trade benefits because you're not, let's say, authentic in your perception. So it hits your economy, hits your tourist industry, for example. In this case, importance of cultural heritage elements turns into kind of realist element, a realist thing to fight for. And also, if we look at it, if we look at ICH from internal politics, we will see that NGOs in these countries, with a very well advanced systems of safeguarding of cultural heritage, local people and NGOs do not really care about putting these elements into international lists, because all benefits that they could get from recognition, they receive at national level, some funding, some protection status, whatever. So those are politicians who seek international recognition for for international political debate, I would say, or some goals, foreign affairs goals. Also, if we look at it from internal politics, these debates on cultural heritage often are overlapped with populism. So instead of sorting issues with unemployment, human rights issues, some like economic crisis, whatever, populists at national level, they distract people by saying that, okay, we have international lists, and this piece of element is recognized by other countries. We should do something about it. Let's hate our neighbor or something like this. And finally, the tourism, it has good and bad sides. For tourism, inscription of intangible cultural heritage, it has negative side as well because of simplification. So, for example, tourists are coming to country to do some cultural heritage practices, but they do not understand the meaning in full, and it is just simplified. Also, if there is a huge amount of tourists, the facilities might deteriorate. So it also negative impact, I would say. At this point, I believe I have everything. If you have anything to ask, or questions, comments, complaints, please address them to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. It was really so exciting, especially one of the new, how to say, spheres of interest which outlined during our seminars. And so now, as I see Dr. Rustipov join us, Dr. Rustipov, maybe you want to ask something? No. Okay. Here goes. If you have any question, please use raise your hand function to ask your question, and we will provide for you. So, Eric, as I see in our chat, it may be some type of question from Alexander, and he maybe you can read it, or I will read out.
Oh, so is this acknowledgement unofficial, or are there any legal consequences that may occur if one country steals some cultural inscription? Well, these. Thank you. Okay, let's take first question. If this acknowledgement is unofficial? No, it is official acknowledgement that this element belongs to cultural heritage fund, I would say, of humanity. It belongs to people. It is important part of humankind. But those labeling with countries, particular countries, they are. I would compare it with Olympics. In Olympic Games, you do not have official competition for medals, right? It is unofficial competition for medals. And when some media portray that this country has this kind of this amount of medals, or this country has this amount of medals, it is unofficial, but still people perceive it in a very serious way, even though it is unofficial. And the second question, or are there any legal consequences that may occur if one country steals some cultural inscription? It's interesting question, but I believe there is nothing on the code, nothing on the convention, and it is actually hard to steal the element of cultural heritage, because you as an independent country can submit your nomination and claim that we also have this kind of cultural element. Why we should share it with other countries, and it will be praised actually. But again, if it happens in different platform, for example, code of food standards, like standardization of food and practices, how it should be prepared. I think there should be some there should be some kind of processes, some systems where your stealing will be judged or sued in international court, or it will be at least clarified, like it was with kimchi and kimochi in case of Japan. So it was the special code of alimentarius, I think, that explained clearly that kimochi is one thing and kimchi is different thing. The same thing happened with kimchi and pao chai, the Chinese thing. Okay.
Thank you so much. I see Dilshot Akbarov want to ask some question. Please, Dilshot.
Hi, Eriks, Dr. Varpahovskis. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation today. Here, sitting in Seoul, I was thinking about there is quite a history between these three countries, isn't it? Quite a history, and you know, it's something similar that you know, in a sense, that countries are broadly fighting both historically and also nowadays they have issues over the intangible assets. And when it comes to the kimchi issue, this is a very big topic, a very hot topic at the moment in Korea, as we're living in this country. I know that Korea sources about 90% of its kimchi from China, although claiming that kimchi is a Korean food, but Korea, for obvious reasons, of course, China has a comparative advantage compared to Korea, and they produced kimchi far more than Korea. And the question is, do you think that countries should kind of make more fiscal investment, even though it involves let's say ignoring the competitive advantage between them? Perhaps the countries may need to have identify these intangible assets as a strategic assets that they need to protect, just as they do for agriculture products, just as they do like for military equipment, etc. So that's my question.
Okay, thank you, Dilshot, for your question. It is very interesting one, actually, and I would say there might be some attempts to do so, but the problem with it is that culture, it's quite fluid, it's not stable, and it evolves continuously. So you cannot in one moment just like freeze it and say, okay, this is our standard and this is our culture, and nobody should claim, some strangers shouldn't claim for it. Okay. Also, what would happen with the will of countries to promote its country image and its culture outside of country? Imagine, like, I'm living in Latin America. I studied in Korea. I love kimchi. I want to make kimchi, but if I live in Latin America, I might not find some ingredients to make it properly, but I will make it and sell, let's say, in my restaurant and claim it is kimchi. Local people who live in Latin America might say, okay, it's cool, but let's say Korean authorities in this case would say, no, you shouldn't call it kimchi. Then it will hit their cultural promotion back, right? This thing actually happened to, let's say, Japan some time ago. I think they tried to introduce some codes and some particular ways how sushi should be made, and let's say, academicians, like scholars, started to, and even press started calling it sushi police policy. And on the one hand, they tried to control the way how sushi are cooked, but on the other hand, it hit them back, because it kind of, their cultural promotion stumbles on it. Thank you.
That was a great answer.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Vishnikova. Nice
Yes.
to see you.
So sorry for my late. I was late because I have another meeting in our department. But Eriks is a specialist in Korean and in Korea specialist. And I want to ask you. I am sorry I haven't opportunity to listen to your presentation, but I know and I am persuaded that it was great, and I promise that I will see the video. And I have one question. Maybe you have mentioned about this in this presentation, but I want to ask you about the image of South Korea, and what is the success of South Korea in the Middle East? Why they so popular in the Saudi Arabia, Emirates? I mean about the culture of Korea. Yes, what is the instruments they use to promote their popularity? It is the one question. And the second, have you heard the term as emotional democracy? Emotional democracy, according to Korea, to South Korea. I've heard this term emotional democracy from the Japanese professor who said that there are two kinds of democracy. The first is the emotional democracy, and it is connected with the South Korea, and dogmatic democracy, which connected with the Japan. Have you heard such terms, and what can you say about this kind of democracy that highlighted by by Japanese professor? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor, for your two questions. So we'll go first with Middle East. Well, I have impression that the promotion of Korean image was started being successful, starting maybe from Lee Man-bak administration. He really invested a lot in promotion of Korean image all around. We're not talking about Hallyu that started in late 90s now. And eventually this Korean obsession with Koreanness, with the Korean wave, reached Middle East. And among the latest maybe contributions was actually the interest of Korea in establishing partnerships with Gulf countries. And I believe they have now many projects in energy and also in arms, in weapons. So I wouldn't say that cultural image promotion was the side effect, but it was accompanied by it. And also, if we talk about the latest things, I believe Gulf countries, Middle East countries, especially Saudi Arabia, Arab Emirates, they want to stay on the top in the world, also including maybe development of music industry as well. So that's why, and to show off to the world that they are open, because they're also kind of struggling to demonstrate their inclusive and open country image. That's why inviting BTS, you know, like the most popular Korean band in the world, BTS, was one of the ways to show off. And maybe it also had some impact on locals, because they, I believe, haven't seen this kind of performance before, but with the arrival of BTS, it kind of opened new worlds, new, shiny, pinky, bubbly universe that is very attractive. So why not? And talking about the second question about emotional and dogmatic democracy, honestly, I heard it the first time, but I believe, as a public diplomacy scholar, I believe there is a big problem with diplomacies right now. There are so many diplomacies, I don't know, emotional diplomacy, science diplomacy, and you can even go to kimchi diplomacy, whatever diplomacy, and they just populate like the scope with new notions, with new terms, but maybe those emotional diplomacy and dogmatic diplomacy conceptions existed already, but under different names. So I'm not sure about it.
No, I didn't mean the diplomacy, but democracy.
Oh, democracy.
Democracy, yes, democracy. The regime of democracy is called as emotional democracy in South Korea.
Oh, that is absolutely totally new.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much, dear colleagues. Maybe someone have a question? No? So I really believe that your presentation was really so great, and you can answer all questions you have. As a supervisor, there is no question. So in this case, if you want, we can finish, because we already, after 4 minutes, we will run out of times. So first of all, one more time, on behalf of the School of International Regional Studies, Faculty of World Economy and International Affairs, I would thank you to accept our invitation and for your great speech presentation. Really, the cultural aspects of international relations is also so important, but unfortunately we have not so much specialists who can, as you describe us, some vital moments, especially relevant with some cultural, intangible cultural heritage, and etc. So really, it was so exciting. And one more time, thank you so much. And secondly, I want to thank our dear guest today that he will be with us. And using this opportunity, my authority as chairperson, I would invite you to our next meeting within the framework of our school special project, Contemporary Areas. One more time, thank you all for being with us. It was really great.
Thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for organization.
Dr. Varpahovskis, thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah.
Thank you. I believe, I hope you enjoyed all, and I believe more people will enjoy it later when it is posted on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
it will be in 1 week on our website. You can, if you want, find our
YouTube channel. Yeah, it will be. Okay.
So in this case, I will end our today conference one more time. Thank you so much, and have a good